Yep, Matthew in boot camp. And then Michael soon to follow. Anything else? All right, Dana, if you would, please.
Lord, our Father in heaven, we come before you this morning, and we just thank you for being mindful of us, Lord. We know that you're always there, faithful to us, even when we slip up and aren't following the right path. But we know you're always there with open arms to receive us back. And we thank you for that. We thank you for the forgiveness you provided us through your Son. And we thank you for him as our mediator to come before you. Lord, we have some things that we're excited about, some works that we're trying to do here. We ask your blessing on. For the men's rally that's coming up, we ask that you would be with men to get excited about it, to realize that it's something that they need to work on their spiritual foundation, to come and hear the words that Chris has prepared for us. And we ask your blessing on him as he prepares for that. Lord, for some of our outreach programs, we have the giveaway, the diaper bank, some of the things that we're trying to reach out to our community. We ask your blessing on that we might provide a physical or earthly need, Lord, but it might touch somebody spiritually and they might come closer to you. For the parenting workshop coming up that Clint and Kara are working on, we ask your blessing on that we can all look to how we can become better parents and really give our kids the upbringing that they need in you. Lord, for some people that we have that we want you to be mindful of, for the Russell family, especially the girls, Lord, ask your blessing on their health, on their development. Lord, you've shown us great things so far. We're so thankful for that. We just ask your continued blessing on them as they grow in their health. For Jackie and Emma Green, Lord, the health problems that they've been going through, and, just ask that you would help them to heal up from those and get over these things that are coming back from schools. We know that's a hotbed for these kinds of sicknesses. We just ask that you be with all our teachers also as they're working in that area. Lord, for Matthew and Camp and Michael, who's soon to follow, Lord, we just ask your blessing on these young men as they're going out and finding their way in the world. That things would go well for them, they'd be safe, but Lord, that they wouldn't forget you. And just please build them up and support them. Help us to support in any way that we can. Lord, as we go on to study this morning, help us to have open hearts and minds to your word and to the people that have gone before us, that we might learn from them. So in Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Dana. Okay, if you want to follow along or jump into your Bibles, we're going to be in 2 Chronicles 25. With this king, this is kind of, as I was working on this lesson, this is kind of like the rinse and repeat lesson. I mean, this is kind of how this happens with too many of these kings. We talked last week with Joash about the power of influence, and we've talked about several kings listening to the wrong people, getting the wrong voices in their ears. And I don't mean like hearing voices. I just mean like listening to the wrong people and the way it takes them down the wrong path. Again, with Amaziah, it's going to be kind of some of the same deal. Some of the same things look pretty good, pretty decent at first, sort of, and then it kind of falls apart. But who I think Amaziah most compares with, or compares well with, is we talked about Rehoboam a couple weeks ago, or a few weeks ago. And remember we talked about Rehoboam was the king who was sort of faithful. That he was kind of like, kind of there, kind of not. Amaziah is, again, a picture of blah faithfulness. He's kind of just sort of faithful, kind of there, kind of not. Charlie Brown, to me, you think of somebody who's blah. I don't know if it's before this or there's another separate strip that Lucy tells him there's one word that describes you and it's blah, and he's like, that's it, and he knows it, and he's okay with it. But when we think of this, when it comes to our spirituality or to our faithfulness, Again, we've talked about several of the things we're going to talk about today. Honestly, we've seen already. We've seen this cycle. We've seen this kind of sort of connectedness. This, as Scripture describes Amaziah, he wasn't wholehearted. But I think it's important that we look at that again. In fact, if you look through this list of the kings of Judah, kings of Israel, and then it continues over here because it looked terrible on one screen. I want you to notice this, in this column right here, thumbs up, thumbs down. Look at how many places you see this. This kind of... So now in Israel, at least they're consistent. They're just terrible. But in Judah, there's so many of these who are kind of... really, that doesn't work. I mean, that kind of... That's not faithfulness. That is not what God calls us to. I just finished reading a book by a guy. I'm not going to tell you the book or who it is because he's pretty political. But this book that he wrote was about Christians, as he termed them. It was about Christendom, I guess. But he had some incredible things to say that I was like, he's so right about just this attitude that we try and be a little bit Christian, a little bit worldly. That, as long as we consider being faithful Christians, we showed up at a building 2 or 3 times a week or 4 or 5 times a month, and so we're good Christian people. Well, this is what we see pictured in Amaziah. This is what we saw pictured in Rehoboam. Like I said, you look through here, some of the ones still to come, still kind of the same deal. But this is what we're going to look at is the difference between this halfway, half-hearted Christianity and being committed. Because that big picture, that's what I hope you take from this whole quarter. As we've looked at all of these kings that are, some of them pretty good, some of them do some great things. In fact, it really gets a little more positive as we finish out this quarter with the kings, because we see some incredible achievements, some real revival from the kings. But what we've seen way too often is this not quite being committed, being I'm kind of God's person. Amaziah is introduced to us in 2 Chronicles 25, the first couple of verses. He literally comes right after Joash. Would somebody please read 2 Chronicles 25, 1 and 2, please? Just anybody.
Amaziah was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Jehoiada of Jerusalem. He did right in the sight of the Lord, yet not with a whole heart.
He did right in the sight of the Lord, yet not with a whole heart. 2 Kings 14, the parallel passage in verse 3 in 2 Kings 14 says, he did what was right in the Lord's sight. He was not like his ancestor David. He did everything his father Joash had done. Now, if you don't know Joash, you might think, oh, that's cool. He did things just like his father. But since we just studied Joash, you go, oh, that's too bad. That he's considered to be okay. But he's just not quite all in. So, again, we're going to see some of the same things that we saw, honestly, with Rehoboam. But I'll just be completely frank with you. I think this is our problem today. I think this is the problem of 21st century, maybe American Christians, but maybe Christians in general. Is we hesitate to be all in. We hesitate to commit completely because it's hard. It's more of a challenge. Maybe I'll say it this way. It's a little bit easier to be kind of faithful but kind of worldly at the same time, because then people at work don't really want to know you're the big Christian person. It's not quite as awkward sometimes. But when you're all in, it should impact everything you do. So we're going to look at these 7 traits of half-hearted faith. And like I said, some of these are going to sound unfortunately, very familiar. But then we'll get to a little bit more positive look as we look past Amaziah's life. So Amaziah takes over after Joash, and one of the first things that we're going to see is this half-hearted commitment to God means a little bit of obedience, but not too much obedience. Not going completely all the way in. Look at chapter 25, verses 3 and 4. As soon as the kingdom was firmly in his grasp, he executed his servants who had killed his father the king. Remember Joash, the servants had this plot against him. The servants killed him. So he executes them. However, he did not put their children to death because, now listen to how this reads. He just kills all these servants. It's a vendetta. He kills these people who killed his father, but he doesn't kill everybody. Because, as is written in the law, in the book of Moses, where the Lord commanded, fathers are not to die because of children, and children are not to die because of their fathers, for each one will die for his own sins. Almost even in these verses, you get the idea of a guy who's going to do what he wants, but then God influences him a little bit. Because he just flat out kills these people for killing his father, but at least, he doesn't kill everybody. Let's skip down to verse 12. 11 and 12. Amaziah strengthened his position and led his people to the Salt Valley. He struck down 10,000 Seirites, and the Judahites captured 10,000 alive. They took them to the top of a cliff where they threw them off, and all of them were dashed to pieces. Now, I understand the way warfare was then was just different. There's a lot of things that we just kind of go, wow. But that seems excessive to me. I mean, I don't know if that's, again, what we'll see is we don't see any sort of counsel from God on how he does any of this. That he seems to be going his own direction. Now, again, he doesn't kill their children, and that's super common. We've even seen that a king will say, you offended me, I'm going to kill you, and I'm going to kill your children. Amaziah doesn't do that. So there's some sort of notion. Sometimes we go, well, maybe, at least he obeyed some. But that's not who we are, right? That's not who we're called to be. We don't obey some. We're not a little bit committed to Jesus. We're not a little bit Christian. I mean, it's like, I remember my mom when I was younger used to talk about, she was like a 32nd Cherokee or something like that. Some sort of way distant portion. But she'd always say that's we can't be that as Christians. We can't be, we can't be a quarter Christian. I'm like a quarter Italian, a quarter this, and I'm quarter Christian. You can't be that. That you need to be completely committed to your faith. This whole idea of I'll obey most of what God says, but some of it that's not for me. Well, again, what we see with Amaziah, at least right off the bat, is there's a connection to God, because it even says that it indicates, at least it kind of hints that the law of Moses was still something was in his head, that he was like, well, I can't kill these kids, but then I'll capture these prisoners and throw them off a cliff. So a little bit of a mixed message coming there. Now, certainly this is not what God wants from the leader of his people. I mean, we'll just put that, unless God directs him to do these things, which we don't see. We kind of see a guy going a little bit rogue, which goes to the next thing. Another trait is seeking what I want and not what God wants. Now, again, this is something we've seen with several of these kings, where things go pretty well and they seem to have some success, and then they leave God out and they start going their own direction. In 7 through 10, this is all kind of, I don't mean to skip around like this, but let's just cover the story here. He's wanting to, let's just start at verse 5. Amaziah gathered Judah and assembled them according to ancestral families, according to the commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds. He numbered those 20 years old or more for all Judah and Benjamin. He found there to be 300,000 fit young men who could serve in the army, bearing spear and shield. Then, here's where things get a little interesting. Then for 7,500 pounds of silver, he hired 100,000 valiant warriors from Israel, from the northern kingdom. However, now here's where God steps in and says, wait a minute, let's see what I want with this. A man of God, so we have a prophet coming in. A man of God came to him and said, King, do not let Israel's army go with you, for the Lord is not with Israel, all the Ephraimites. But if you go with them, do it. Be strong for battle. But God will make you stumble before the enemy, for God has the power to help or to make one stumble. What does the prophet tell him in essence? What's that? You're on your own. If you got a good army, if you get those guys, that'll be great. You'll have a strong army. But this is not God's idea. This is not, and he even says God can make you successful or God can cause you to stumble. So he has been warned. Then Amaziah, verse 9, said to the man of God, what should I do about this 7,500 pounds of silver I gave to Israel's division? So he's like, well, I just spent a lot of money. I mean, we already paid for these guys. What am I supposed to do about that? The man of God replied, the Lord is able to give you much more than this. Man, just in those two statements from this prophet, there's so many great lessons there. But let's look at this. He puts the brakes on here at least. Let me skip down to 16 and 17. Instead of trying to tell you this story, let me just read it. While he was still speaking to him, wait, no, let's go back because we got to see what the guy says. Verse 14. Then Amaziah came from the attack on the Edomites. He brought the gods of the Syrites and set them up as his gods. He worshipped before them and burned incense to them. So the Lord's anger was against Amaziah. And he sent a prophet to him, another prophet, maybe saying, I don't know, who said, why have you sought a people's gods who could not rescue their own people from you? While he was still speaking to him, the king asked, have we made you the king's counselor? Stop. Why should you lose your life? So he goes to the battle. He brings back some of the people that he just defeated's gods and sets them up. And the prophet comes to him and goes, what are you doing? And listen to the logic the prophet even uses. These were their gods. You just defeated them. How strong are their gods? Well, why would you bring them back? They don't even work, apparently. Dana.
This kind of reminds me of in our present day situation, those are out there trying to preach the prosperity gospel. It seems like Amaziah, the only thing he's interested in is what transaction can God do for me?
Yeah.
And how can I benefit from it? So much that he's going to cover all his bases and go to the other gods too, just in case they're regional over here. You know?
Yeah. And again, that whole idea is something that we've seen many times with some of these kings. That, yeah, we're going to keep Jehovah God in his place, but then we're going to put these other guys around too, just to be safe. Now, in 17 through the rest of the chapter, or at least through the 23 or so, Amaziah decides he's going to go up against Israel. And he says, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to go with King, what's the guy's, Jehoash. And he says, I want to meet with him face to face, which means we're going to go to battle. And he's already been warned about making his own choices by a prophet, one prophet, maybe two prophets, depending on if this is the same one or not. But now, and the prophet just said, God's not with Israel. But the king of Israel, Jehoash, comes to him and says he wants to meet him face to face. Look at verse 18. King Jehoash of Israel sent word to King Amaziah of Judah, saying, the thistle in Lebanon sent a message to the cedar in Lebanon, saying, give your daughter to my son as a wife. Then a wild animal in Lebanon passed by and trampled the thistle. Now, here's a little sub-lesson. Sometimes you want to teach somebody a lesson, be a little bit more clear. Because he tells this little Aesop's fable to Amaziah, and Amaziah obviously does not get it at all. He's like, okay, so anyway, we going to war or what? Because he says, verse 19, he says, you have said, Lord, I've defeated Edom, and you've become overconfident that you will get glory. Now stay at home. Why stir up such trouble so that you will fall and Judah with you? So, to Jehoash's credit, he clarifies there at the end. But he says, you're getting a little big for your britches here. You know, you think you can do this. you think you can handle this situation. He said, don't do this. You're going to bring disaster on yourself. You're going to bring disaster on God's people. He's been successful. And he's now kind of on a precipice here. Okay, is being successful wrong in any way? In and of itself, being wealthy isn't wrong. Being a great business success, a great sports success, whatever. None of that is in and of itself wrong, and I think we understand that. But the problem is what we see with Amaziah, and we've seen before, is this idea of kind of setting God aside. And even, as we've seen also, this idea of not listening to good counsel. When we're successful in what Amaziah should have done, is said, you know what, God gave us, has taken care of us with this war with the Edomites. How about we just be content with where we are? I don't have to go show off because I just won one battle. And when we are successful, instead of giving God the honorable mention, let's give God the king of Israel even says, you're trying to get your own glory in this. Okay, so that's number 2. And number 3 is very similar, following human wisdom, not God's. He's built his kingdom. He's building his kingdom by defeating his enemies, doing everything the way that it would be done culturally. But he is sliding away from what God wants. He's listening to what culture tells him is okay. If there's any lessons contemporarily that we can take, I believe, from the Old Testament, from these kings, from the prophets, the minor prophets in particular maybe, is we have got to be careful that culture doesn't convince us that what is sin is okay. And we're there in so many ways. We're to the point where if we say this is a sin, culture comes at us and we're attacking that person. We're calling sin, sin. And it's not even us calling sin, sin. We're just acknowledging what God says. He's in a situation right now where, according to all his contemporary, he'd be doing the right thing. But he's at the point, Amaziah is, where he's not following God's counsel. Another trait is it means concern for gain over obedience. Again, Dana pointed this out. He's talking about it's almost like, what can God do for me now? He's worried about this money he spent. Then the statement from the prophet, the man of God, is so great. It's like, don't worry, God can give you so much more than that 7,500 pounds of silver you just spent. Don't worry about that. You made a dumb choice. God will take care of it if you follow his will. Don't be concerned about what that didn't sound right. I was going to say, don't be concerned about what God can do for you. But in some ways we are. And we should be concerned about what God's going to do for us but what we should be concerned about is what can we do for God? How can we humble ourselves before God and just follow what his will is? When we think about this idea, what does Jesus have to say about the cost of things, about the cost of following him? What's that? It's going to cost you your life. I mean, and other times he talks about other things. Give up home, give up father, give up mother, give up brothers. He gives up, a lot of stuff. And then he ultimately says, if you're not willing to lay down your life, take up your cross. And we've talked about this in this class. I've preached this. You've heard this a lot of your life probably. Only reason you never take up a cross is to die on it. And Jesus says, take up a cross every day. So the idea for this wholeheartedness that we don't see from Amaziah is you have to be willing to give up everything. Now, that almost is a cliche for us. We need to be willing to give up everything for Jesus. And most of us live in air-conditioned, heated homes and drive. We have 2 or 3 cars, and the idea of give up everything means very little to us, honestly. I think that's something that kind of just goes dum, dum, hits us, and we don't think about sacrifice in that way, because it's easier for us to be Christians maybe than it should be. But we have to even consider not just the stuff. Sometimes it's prestige, sometimes it's place, sometimes it's companions, friendship. Again, some of the things that we've seen all throughout this. Okay, number 5, it means falling for the evil that you're supposed to oppose. And again, this is a little bit, we've kind of touched on this some. The Edomites that he just defeats in that middle section that we looked at. These people were idol worshipers. And instead of just destroying their whole system, he brings their idols back in. It's that, I can never think of the word, that whatever the word is that you talk about mixing your faith with worldliness, or mixing your faith with a little bit of somebody else's faith, some other type of belief system. And man, that's our culture. That is our culture today. Dana referred to the prosperity gospel. There's a cultural Christianity that is be a good person, love people. You don't have to go to church. You don't have to mess with those religious people. That's one of the great fallacies in our culture today, is that religion is bad. Jesus is the one who said, on this rock I'll build my church, and I'll draw all people to me, to this thing that I'm building. We tend to, again, it's that whole message of we've got to be cautious that we understand God's word is the ultimate authority for us. That everything else we have to deal with through that lens. That God's word is the authority. This whole, man, I like to park here. Well, this whole idea of bringing in other gods. That's something I want you to think about. Do we ever do that? And I mean, we immediately think, no, I don't have any idols in my house. But what other gods do we try and bring with us into our Christian life? That I want to be a good, solid, committed Christian, and I want to raise a Christian family, or I want to be a good Christian employee, or I want to be whatever. But I'm also going to hang on to this. I need to keep this with me too. I also need to work, X number of extra hours a week so I can retire at 54 or whatever, because I want to have my first million at 35 or whatever. Not evil in and of itself, but are we bringing in other gods that are taking the place of Jehovah God? That's what Amaziah did. We can't be, when it comes to evil, when it comes to sin, and again, evil might have been, well, no, I was going to say evil might have been the wrong word because it's a very strong word. Evil is the word we should use more often, because sin is evil. I don't care what it is. Lying to your mama, that's evil. That's a sin. Whatever it is, that's what we need to oppose. You think of what Peter says. How does Peter describe Satan when he says, watch out for Satan? A roaring, he doesn't describe him as a sneaky little fella. I mean, he is a roaring lion who's going to rip your throat out. I mean, that's what he says. And we have to think about that when we think about accepting things that culture tells us we have to accept. Is that a prowling lion who is ready? I mean, and again, Peter doesn't say he's a prowling lion ready to hurt you and maim you and make you have a really terrible day. He's going to kill you. He wants to devour you. So we can't play with sin. And again, that's what Amaziah does. Defeats this army and brings back all their toys and sets them up. And it's like, what are you doing? And this one, we've seen this over and I'm just going to leave that one. It's the same thing. It's a broken record. This is something we have to be so conscientious about. And really that's the whole reason I go through this lesson with these points again. They do repeat because they're so stinking important for us to try and be faithful Christians. Our communities, our co-workers, our peers, our extended family can't make our decisions for us. God's got to be the one who makes all of our decisions. And then with Amaziah, this is something else we struggle with. Falling victim to pride. He really wanted, the other king even tells him, you're doing this for your glory. He really wanted to go defeat Jerusalem. He really wanted to go defeat Israel. He really wanted to be able to say, I just beat the Edomites, and then I went and took out Israel. Look at the end of this. Verse 22. Before that, verse 21, they face off. Verse 22, Judah was routed before Israel, and each man fled to his own tent. King Jehoash of Israel captured Judah's king Amaziah, son of Joash, son of Jehoahaz, at Beth Shemesh. Then Jehoash took him to Jerusalem and broke down 200 yards of Jerusalem's wall from the Ephraim gate to the corner gate. He took all the gold, silver, all the utensils that were found in Obed-Edom in God's temple, the treasures of the king's palace, and the hostages. Then he returned to Samaria. What was Amaziah worried about when he had the mercenaries hired from Israel?
He was afraid he couldn't trust God to do it for him. A lack of faith.
Yeah, he had a lack of faith for sure. But what does he tell the prophet? He goes, well,
The money.
yeah, what about that 7,500 pounds of silver? Well, if you stick with God, he says God will take care of that. He didn't stick with God, and he loses everything. He is wiped out completely. He is. Now, this is interesting too. Let me just finish out the chapter real quick. Verse 25, Judah's king Amaziah, son of Joash, lived 15 years after the death of Israel's king Jehoash, son of Jehoahaz. The rest of the events of Amaziah's reign, from beginning to end, are written in the book of the kings of Judah and Israel. From the time Amaziah turned from following the Lord, a conspiracy was formed against him in Jerusalem, and he fled to Lachish. However, men were sent after him to Lachish, and they put him to death there. They carried him back on horses and buried him with his father in the city of Judah. Now, it sounds like that after Jehoash of Israel, after he died, it sounds like Amaziah lived 15 years. It almost doesn't sound like he was really the king. I mean, it almost sounds like he just kind of, that he ran into Lachish, ran for his life. But it almost sounds like he just kind of existed. Dana.
I was just thinking, if it's 15 years that they plotted, that's got to be some kind of conspiracy plot that they're working on.
Yeah, exactly. That's a Oliver Stone movie ready to happen right there. But the thing is, what we need to see as we wrap up real quick here, what we see a great deal of in Amaziah, and Tommy, I stole your crown pictures, is just a great deal of arrogance. A great deal of, I'm going to do things my way. Now, honestly, for us as Christians today, rarely, and I mean, I've met a couple of people who do this and kind of go that route. For the most part, when we struggle with our faith, it's never this blatant. We're never just so, I'm going to do whatever I want to do. But in some ways, deep down, we're going, I'm going to do whatever I want to do. We just don't say it out loud. We just do it on the inside. We just say, okay, God, I know I'm supposed to love this neighbor. I know I'm supposed to treat my wife better. I know I'm supposed to treat my coworkers better. And I'm supposed to worship. I'm supposed to spend time with my church family and serve. But I'm going to do what I want to do. And we don't get that direct about it, but that pride is often there. John.
It looks different today. People use their feet because their pride exists if they're not here.
Yeah.
So many people leave the church because they want to do what they want to do, not what God tells them.
Right. Oh yeah. There is. I mean, it happens that happens way too often. If an eldership or somebody, a family member, confronts somebody about a sin in their life. We talked about that last quarter with conflict, right? Sometimes there's a great result where people go, you know what, you're right. I really need this. I need to fix this. But too often people go, oh, those church people. They called me out on this. I'm never walking. I talked to a friend of mine last week, somebody you guys know, a lot of you know. He told me a situation in his family that somebody was confronted about a sin in their extended family, and they said, I'm never walking back in that building again. It's like, okay, it's just what God says. I mean, so why is it this congregation's fault? I mean, but like I said, we don't usually do this, but sometimes we get to that point. So what are the consequences that we see with Amaziah? The immediate consequence is Israel's defeated. And it says that each man fled to his own tent. That's an indication that the army completely disbanded. Remember at the beginning, he had this whole list. He had the Judahites and the Benjamites, and he had this whole list, had whatever it was, 30,000 or whatever the number was. A good-sized army, gone. Money, gone. Temple, walls knocked down. He runs off into isolation. Long-term results, wasted years, and then eventually his death. This whole plot Judah's King Amaziah, verse 25. I'm sorry, we already read that. Verse 27. From the time Amaziah turned from following the Lord, a conspiracy was formed against him in Jerusalem. He fled to Lachish. We already read that. They put him to death there. Verse 25. We already read all that. Never mind. But it seems like that last period of his life that he wasn't even ruling. He was just he was running from this conspiracy, running from this plot to kill him. So it's all completely negative. So I don't want to leave you with that, because that's, like I said, we're going to kind of turn a corner a little bit, but there's some more positive coming with some of these kings. But let's kind of reflect a little bit for a minute here on this whole idea of what we're trying to accomplish with looking at these kings and queens. What we see way too often is this idea of, I'll serve God when it's convenient and it benefits me. I'll let you make the contemporary connection to that, because that is a human existence long problem. I'll follow God as long as it's good for me. We understand that full commitment equals an eternal reward. I hope we all understand that. That's one of those things that I think we teach, I think we preach about, we remind people about heaven, but I hope in your mind heaven is very real, and that it is a real place. I'll tell you straight up, I can't explain heaven to you. I mean, it's hard for me to understand what's it going to be like, what physical. I mean, we get a new body. How's that going to work? I don't care either. I just want to be there, because that's where God's going to be. So I hope we understand that full commitment is what it's going to take to get there. I mean, there isn't like. Like like in airplanes, there's like the economy, there's coach, there's economy, there's coach plus or whatever. That's not how heaven is. You're not going to get the cheap seats in heaven. I mean, it's either first class or not at all. I mean, that's what it amounts to. But it's going to take our full commitment. And again, going back to what we talked about earlier, Jesus himself is the one who said, this is not on this page. Mark 8:35. Whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. Losing your life that's a big, bold statement. But what I think we can understand is when Jesus says you lose your life, he doesn't necessarily mean dying. I mean, it doesn't mean physical death. But in that section, I encourage you to go look at Mark chapter 8. Go look at Matthew 15, I think, is the parallel with that. Jesus is talking about being willing to give it everything. Being willing to say, I don't care what people at work say. I don't care what people at school say. I don't care what my extended family says. I'm going to be all in for Jesus. I'm going to be all in for this thing. And I've talked with people who have, and I mean, I've been there myself when I was younger, especially. This whole idea of trying to be kind of sitting on the fence, Christianity, that's difficult. I mean, it's easier to be, that's kind of the hot or cold. It's easier to be either all out or all in, because trying to be a little bit of both it confuses you, I think. But when we look at these kings, just as we wrap up this month, this is what we want to, this is our objective, is to be all in. It's to learn from the mistakes, from this half-heartedness, this lack of wholeheartedness that we see way too often, this whole concept of letting culture push me in different directions, and just standing there and just being all in for what God wants us to be. Any thoughts? All right, I think you have me for one more week, and then Blake, and then Tommy, or vice versa, one or the other. Okay, thanks.